is real, it's live, and as some comrades say, it's lit, right? lit. Real, live, lit. Right? The revolution is lit.
Uhuru comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Tommy Sunday Study, live with the leader of the African nation, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. My name is Akile Anai, the Director of Agitation and Propaganda for the African People's Socialist Party, as well as your MC for this morning. Today's study is themed Africa Rising, the starting point of the colonial mode of production. This is an extension of last week's discussion, where we received updates and analysis on the situation in the region in Africa known as the Sahel. If you recall, before the most recent Israeli bombardment of Palestine, anti-colonial struggles were exploding in places like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. We saw a summer filled with uprisings against colonialism, especially the French, who have controlled the economies of approximately 14 African so-called countries. These struggles continue as African people on the continent and dispersed throughout the world continue to fight for national liberation. So we continue looking towards Africa, the starting point of the violently imposed colonial mode of production by Europe on the rest of the world, to further understand the anti-colonial struggles we see being waged across the globe. When looking at the events unfolding in the world today, we have to struggle to identify the starting point. How did we get here? Doing this allows us to see that these anti-colonial struggles happening on the continent, in the so-called Americas, and in Palestine are not new phenomena, not peculiar, but inevitable. Joining us in this discussion is Luwezi Kinshasa, Secretary General of the African Socialist International, or the ASI. The ASI was founded by Chairman Omali Yeshitela based on the recognition that African people represent a forcibly dispersed, colonized nation, where we must unite under the leadership of the African working class for national liberation and socialism. Secretary General Luwezi is based in London, but was born in Congo. We will have an overview from SG Luwezi, then we'll turn it over to the leader of the African nation and worldwide African revolution, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Following the main presentations, we'll look at announcements before going into questions and answers. And we will be taking some of those questions that came in from last week. And of course, as always, before we start, we do not want to, have this discussion that is, just something that we're participating in. We have to make sure that as many people as possible can see and have access to this analysis, this worldview, this understanding about how the world got to be this way. Because we know that the colonial ruling class, the bourgeoisie, and their media apparatus, their information is not going to be able to explain the world this way, coming from the perspective of African and colonized people. And, when we are saying expressing our views, our worldview. We're talking about expressing anti-colonial free speech. And on platforms like Facebook and Instagram and YouTube do not, want to allow African and colonized people to exercise anti-colonial free speech. In fact, they work overtime to be able to shut down our capacity to be able to communicate our worldview, our perspectives to the masses of people. And why? Because it offers an alternative. It offers a different explanation. It offers an actual future that people can look forward to. So let's participate right now in the fight back to defend the right to anti-colonial free speech by making sure we share this study far and wide, by doing the exact opposite of what Mark Zuckerberg wants to happen and, being able to contain this conversation. Let's participate right now and share. Just take a moment this second right now. It just takes literally 3 seconds to share this discussion, whether you're watching on Facebook, tagging a friend right in the comment section to make sure that they can see this study, that they can also share out. Make sure to like and subscribe to Chairman Amali's Twitch channel and also to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube. Click that notifications button so that you can get notifications for every time the Burning Spear goes live, every time the chairman goes live. Make sure that you're on the top of those notifications. So again, make sure that you participate in the fight back right now for anti-colonial free speech by sharing, liking, subscribing, commenting in the chat section, and saying #shared, and also letting us know where you're tuning in from. So thank you, comrades, for participating in the fight back for anti-colonial free speech. And we will continue this throughout the study and getting as many participants to be to view and participate, in this discussion. So again, thank you for your participation. It is my honor now to welcome up for our overview, Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa of the African Socialist International. Uhuru SG Luwezi.
Well, Director Akili, thank you so much for the overview. And as usual, thanks so much for inviting me to be part of this program. It's really a privilege to be in the platform with Chairman Amadi Chela, who is the leader, not just for the African nation, but he's the leader of the emerging new world, a world where the colonizers and the model production of colonialism will no longer be in existence. And it's really profound privilege to be part of such programs. So I want to salute all the leading members of the Central Committee of the African Socialist Party, all the regional leaders, and all the members of our party, wherever they are around the world, from Europe to the Americas and Africa. I salute all of you, and I salute each one of you who is watching this program. And I think you're taking notes. Director Akile gave a lot of instructions, and you're going to implement those instructions, because we are not just people who are participating in this program, but we are also makers of history. So we need to act in everything that's being said. So today, we're going to basically follow up on what we said from last time. And I don't have to tell you this, you see the world definitely that is changing. You see the resistance of the heroic peoples of Palestine. You see the struggles in West Africa, throughout the continent. You see the resistance in Haiti, inside the United States, and inside Europe itself. We are in a new place today, and the colonizers are losing, and that is really a fundamental problem for them. They are losing. Africa has rejected France colonialism. It's no secret. Everybody knows that. Everybody's talking about it. And all the explanations coming from the colonizers do not make sense. They said, well, it's a clash of civilization. They say it's a struggle between democracy and autocracy, and which is not new for the colonizer trying to stay relevant. When I was growing up, they used to say the struggle was between capitalists and socialists. They used to say the struggle used to be between the East and the West. And not too long time ago, but some like 25 years ago, they used to say, now the struggle in Africa after the collapse of Soviet Union, they start saying the struggle now is for multipartism. Basically, everywhere in Africa, we need to see elections on a general basis. And we know all those things are not true. because the fundamental reality is that the fundamental contradiction in the world, everywhere we are, come from one place, come from what Chairman has referred to as the colonial mode of production. This is the fundamental problem we need to solve. And the study we're going to do today, you cannot take that central element away. And this is a new input by Chairman Omali in a discussion, not just for African people, but for everybody on the planet. If you want to understand everything's going on, if you want to have a qualitative understanding for everything, you must include the colonial model of production as the fundamental problem preventing humanity from going forward, preventing Africans and other colonized people for being free. That's really the starting point. You can't take that away. So we're going to look at West Africa, and I'll say a few things from where we left off last time. So I have a short PowerPoint. We're going to start from that PowerPoint. And this is the question Chairman asked. You can purchase this book. It's a fundamental book everyone needs to have. On page 63, he asked a simple question: would capitalism and the resultant European wealth and African impoverishment have occurred without the European attack on Africa, its division, African slavery, dispersal, colonialism, and neocolonialism? Of course, the answer is no. 1,000 times no, no, no. This is fundamental. You can't, if you don't take this into your understanding of the world, you always come to a wrong conclusion. You might even come to the conclusion imperialists want you to come to. Next slide, please. And all the wars, particularly what's going on at the moment, this horrible assault on our people of Palestine is part of the colonial model of production war, basically, and is one of the colonial model of production wars. Next, please. And now there is a connection, direct connection with what's happening in Palestine and what's happening in West Africa, for the simple reason that you probably may remember this image in 2011. I put this image because one thing, if you come to France, they ask themselves the question, why Africa has decided to reject French colonialism? Why there is so much anti-French sentiment? They're saying, they're not saying anti-colonialism, but anti-French sentiment in Africa. But we remember how President Gbagbo and his wife, Simone Gbagbo, were chased out of power. This is a presidential palace. This is the bedroom. This is the humiliation for not just for Gbagbo and his wife, for all Black people to see a president of a Black country being chased out of power when, in fact, he won the election. Now we know he won that election. And the French say he didn't win the election, but a French puppet won the election. So they imposed Ouattara, who is a French puppet agent right now, who is in power in Côte d'Ivoire. And Côte d'Ivoire is a key strategic colony for France to be relevant in Africa. So you go two contrasts, when Gbagbo was in power and when he was kicked out of power. Next, please. And we remember when the French colonizers assassinated Sankara, no Africans in the world, and particularly in West Africa, has forgotten this. There's so much loved. Young Thomas Sankara was assassinated by the government. It was an alliance of the left and right in France, Mitterrand and Chirac. One represent the left, and another one represent the right. They both united to assassinate Thomas Sankara. And you have a list of African presidents who were assassinated in Africa. You have Modibo Keïta, this is in Mali. So we are not surprised that Mali now is a part, or a leading part, in fact, to get the French out of Africa. So the president, Modibo Keïta, who was an ally on Kwame Nkrumah and Lumumba, who wanted Africa to be united, was assassinated by French imperialism. So that's 1968. And we have Hamani Diori, who initially was a French puppet, but when he disagreed with the French overthrew him. And that was in Niger, we're talking about today. Another president, Barre Maïna Sara, not too long time ago, was also overthrown in Niger by the French. So we are not surprised. today in Niger, Africans saying to France, you need to get out of Niger. And another one, of course, before Barre Mainasara, that's François Ngata Tombal Baye. I remember this president. He was assassinated in 1975 because he disagreed how the French should use the resources of the uranium. And the French assassinated him. And this is the same also for the one before Barre Mainasara and Amani Diori. They disagree with the French ruling class how they should use the resources of Niger. And of course, we have Ruben Unyobe. He was not the president, but he was a leader of Cameroon National Liberation Movement. He was a key leader. He was like the Didan Kemafi in Kenya, because you have to remember, in Africa, countries that launched sustainable, relevant, strong armed struggle, Cameroon is one of them, of course, including Algeria and Kenya. So he was killed by the French. And in Cameroon, even up to date, is considered as the most important leader in Cameroon. Well, much loved by the people, even up to date. And one more leader I didn't mention yet is the top name on this PowerPoint. That's Sylvanus Olympio. And Sylvanus Olympio was assassinated in 1963 for the simple reason he was the first president, of course, after Sékou Touré, but for those who agreed in the so-called France-Afrique, he said to the French, I'm not going to use the CFA franc. I'm going to have my own currency. And he decided to print his own currency. And the French said, you can't do that. And they organized his overthrow, then assassinated him. He was assassinated on that day. In fact, when he was trying to flee from the soldiers sent by the French to kill him, he went to the U.S. embassy, which was not too far from his residency. The United States embassy closed the door. They closed the gate. You cannot come here. So allowing the military sent by the French to catch him and kill him. So that was Sylvanus Olympio. So mostly Africans, particularly in West Africa, remember all these atrocities, colonial violence committed by the French government against the African president. Next one, please. And of course, the overthrow of Gaddafi. We remember that. People in the region remember that. Many Africans used to work from the region in Libya. African from Mali, African from Niger, African from Chad. Many Africans in the region used to work in Libya. Overnight, they were chased out by the jihadists, all these bandits armed by the United States, by NATO, by French and British and so on. Africans remember that. Even today, Libya has become a nightmare for Africans. Even the indigenous African population of Libya have been attacked, killed by all these, bandits armed by NATO leaders. Africans remember that. Not only the day that they have the Tuareg. Gaddafi integrated the elements of the Tuareg. The Tuareg are nomadic population throughout the Sahel. And those from Mali, some of them were integrated in Libyan army. And after the overthrow of Gaddafi, so the colonizers, the French, the others, they armed those Tuareg, and some of them, they were already in the army, so they know how to use the weapons, so send them in Mali to destabilize Mali. So you're not surprised that people in Mali today are upset. They are angry for what the French have done, because they know what the French have done, how the French armed the Tuareg and the jihadist groups throughout the region. They know that. Next, please. And so, in general, when you listen to the bourgeoisie media, they talk about G5. And these are the countries you see in blue here: Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Chad, and Mauritania. And so all these regions basically is where you see, particularly Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Chad. These are the countries targeted by French colonizer, by United States and the rest of imperialists to maintain colonialism as a monoproduction. All these countries are full of resources, and the main excuses used to justify the presence of armed troops, colonial armed troops, is the so-called let's say presence of jihadist groups. That's the excuse they use to say that we need to intervene to fight terrorism, because they say the jihadists, they are terrorists, therefore we need to help all these African governments to stop terrorism. That's basically the narrative they have developed. They do not say they work together to overthrow Gaddafi. They didn't say they work together to chase former Soviet Union out of Afghanistan. They don't say all those things, and that is really critical. Of course, they also work together to try to destabilize, to break the government of Syria. They did all this work. Where NATO, they worked with the so-called jihadists. They work together. They might have different interests, but that's established fact. They work together. Even former French Prime Minister Laurent Fabius said the jihadists have been doing a good job, and this is recorded. It's a verifiable, quotes he said in one of the interviews he was giving. Next, please. Now, we want Africans just to be very clear, very, very clear. The war in Sahel concerns the whole of the region. It's beyond the G5. It's, from Mauritania, and you go all the way to Eritrea. In fact, it crosses the Red Sea. The war you see in Palestine, the attempt to destabilize Iraq and Syria, they are all part of the same colonial wars to maintain the colonial mode of production. That's what it is. You can't separate all these. That's why Africans should be the first to be concerned when there is war against Palestine, war against Syria, war against Iraq, because in fact, there is a war against all colonizers, and it's a war against all colonized people, and Africa being the cornerstone of the colonial mode of production. We should be the first to be alarmed so we can mobilize, so we can advance our own struggle. And this is our contribution, definitely, against any war of resistance against colonial mode of production taking place around the world. Next, please. And also, this war, as these military bases, being displayed, it gives you an idea where the NATO, the US troops, the French troops, the British troops, the German troops are located. And you see all over the place. In fact, in some places, they just mention things like operational hub or operational units. They don't say military bases, and the United States is at least present in more than 36 countries, and you have all these different alliances being made between the Germans and this government, the French and this government, the British and this government in Africa. So it's more than what you see. But the bottom line is what? They are all wars to control our resources. And Africans anywhere on the planet should be in no doubt that all these wars are first and foremost war to control our resources and maintain the colonial mode of production, which cannot function with the resources of Africa, not just natural resources, our labor, and so on. And it's a war for gold. You have to know the whole Sahel region is full of gold. The whole of Sahel region, Burkina Faso, gold, Mali, gold, Chad, gold, Sudan, gold. Of course, oil everywhere, from Somalia all the way to Mauritania, Mali, Niger, Chad, all these places, oil is everywhere. And of course, as I said, it's not just a war against the Sahel region, it's a war against Africa, which means you go down in Nigeria, for example, it's not by chance you have Boko Haram over there. All those things are connected. War to control oil. Congo is not too far away. War for coltan take place. War to control the trade routes, like the Red Sea is a major trade route. And all the ports of Africa need to be in control by imperialists. You go along the Atlantic coast, all Atlantic coast ports have to be controlled. That's what the United States talks about the Gulf of Guinea, so-called war against drugs. No, it's not war against drugs. The United States is responsible for drugs, heroin, cocaine, and things like that. It's war to control all the ports, all the trade routes, in Africa. The United States is involved in that. Next, please. And in fact, in the last picture you saw, if you just go quickly, last picture, there is one thing I wanted to say, just a couple few things about that. There is one picture, there's one image. Now, here at the bottom, you see this, the US. It's difficult to find images of the United States bases in Africa, but we know in Niger they have two bases, and one of them is where the drones, are based, and this is in Niger. So this is one of the pictures of the United States drone base in Niger. Thank you. Yeah. Next, please. Now, in Sahel, we all know about Sudan. We talked a lot about, when I say we talked about, not just us, but the colonial media talked a lot about what's going on in West Africa, because the French clearly it's a turning point in the struggle against French colonialism in Africa. They're being chased out. It's been recorded in history. So we're not going back. There is no way the French can go back in Africa in the same way. But at the same time, in Sahel, but in another part of Sahel, going toward the east of Sahel, you have the war in Sudan between two factions. And you have first to see Sudan, everything you have to see that in a context. Sudan is not just Sudan by itself, it's within the Sahel. But Sahel in Africa, you have to see that in the context of the country across the Red Sea, which you clearly, we can call that Northeast Africa. By that I mean Saudi Arabia, Yemen, occupied Palestine, Lebanon, all these, because they are just on the other side of the Red Sea, above the Red Sea, and opposite Sudan and Eritrea across the Red Sea. So this is Sudan. There is a war going on in Sudan. Here you have two generals, Al-Fatah Burhan on the left, with the fist raised, and you have Dagano, he's known as a Imiti general. Now, this is not a war between two personalities or just between these two leaders. It's a concentration of interest that includes forces outside Sudan, outside Africa. And it's not by chance that the war erupted in Sudan. People have to remember, not so long time ago, China facilitated a peace agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And that was like a major coup. But we also have to realize that Saudi Arabia depends largely for its food, like vegetable, tomato, and also, what do you call it? Goat's meat, stuff like that, from Sudan. And it's an interest of Saudi Arabia that Sudan is stable. Now, all of a sudden, there is a war there. And clearly, the guy on the right, Imiti, is a well-known criminal. He was the leader of the Janjaweed, killing Africans in Darfur. You remember Darfur? Murder, massacres. This is the guy on the right. He's responsible for it. And this is the guy now supported by many factions. United Emirates Arabs is definitely in support of this guy. The leader, in Libya, you have different factions in Libya. And one faction in Libya, I think his name is Alpha, let me check his name. I don't remember the name of this guy anymore. But basically, the point I'm trying to make, the guy on the right is supported by one of the leader of, that's his name, Khalifa Haftar. Khalifa Haftar is one of the leader in Libya, is in support of this guy, General Emeti. And the guy on the left is seen as the legitimate leader of Sudan. He has the support of the Egyptian government, and most of the African countries support the guy on the left. But what surprises everyone is the silence of the colonizers. The France is silent, Britain is silent, United States silent. The only thing they did, they withdraw quickly their population, but you don't hear any single condemnation or of enmity, the guy on the right. Nothing about it. I'm not saying we should support the guy on the left or anything like that. Only thing I'm saying, the silence of the colonizers speaks volume. Why they're saying nothing? And in the same time, we also know Sudan used to be one. Remember, Sudan used to be one country. And the United States, Israel, and the allies split it into two. Now we have South Sudan and Sudan. Now, if this war continues, the likelihood of having two Sudan is possible, although the General Brown on the left is still have the upper hand from what I've read. But they're talking of possibility also of splitting the current Sudan into two. So that will make, from one Sudan, we will have what? 3 Sudan, which is consistent with the policies of colonizers, which is to colonize Africa, which by dispersing Africans, by splitting Africans against Africans, and basically creating more entities. Next to Sudan, Somalia is not that far. They already split Somalia. In Somalia, in Ethiopia, you have a war in Ethiopia. The attempt to get what is known as Tigrayan population to separate from Ethiopia. And we all know the Tigrayan so-called army is supported by the United States. And this effort to balkanize, to partition Africa further, as for the moment, is failing in Mali. And it probably is failing in Burkina Faso too. And it's failing in Niger too, because part of these wars is also wars to consolidate what they call, the regional groups, basically fighting for separate entities. And this also what Boko Haram in Niger is about. This also was going on in Mozambique. This also was going on in the Congo, where the attempt, clearly, there's an attempt to get 2 at least regions in the Congo separated from the rest of Congo. So war to partition, to balkanize Africa, a war that Kwame Nkrumah warned us against. If Africa failed to unite, we will see an increase of all these wars, because a weaker imperialism, a weaker colonizer needs a much weaker Africa. So they don't need strong centralized state over their colonized state. They don't want that. They want more weaker neo-colonial state that they can manipulate much easily and loot African resources much easily. That's why they destroy Gaddafi, so you all these things going on. And we just want Africans to be aware of that, when we talk of the redemption of Africa, we're talking not only of getting the borders away, but we also want to stop any more assault on Africa, so we can prepare our own counter offensive that will bring all African people together, that will bring the whole countries together, so we can have just one Africa nation, African country with our borders, and we can have basically just one African government. And African internationalism, we're contributing to that. We're redefining not just the African struggle, but we are redefining the entire struggle of our time, which is a struggle to do what? To end colonialism as the mode of production. And that's basically some of the key message of my presentation. I'm not sure if I left any. I'm sure we finished the slide. Is there any more slide? As I say in the beginning, is a short presentation term slide. I don't think there is yeah, that's it. So yeah, that was the slide. Okay. Thank you, comrade. So these are some of the things I just wanted to say as the introduction to Chairman presentation. And I just want to say, thank once more to Director Kelly and the Biosphere team production for inviting me to be part of this study. History definitely is upon us, and let's complete the Black Revolution. Let's take this parasitical colonial model production off our back. So, whoa, everybody.
Uhuru, SG Luwezi. Like we say, hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa. I really, really want to salute this powerful overview, just to continue, again, a continuation of our discussion from last week. And, that left the people, just longing for more, just in terms of being able to redefine our entire understanding of all the struggles that we're looking at today. Because, we can fall into the trap of thinking that these events are not rooted in, a historical context, an outgrowth of some greater, larger contradiction. We, can separate all of these different things as like isolated events or a problem with, corruption over here or something like that, and not a part of a whole continuum, a whole social system that we know better today as the colonial mode of production. And of course, we are able to explain the world as it actually is. We can provide this kind of analysis, the one that you just gave with this overview, because we have the theory of African internationalism. And this theory, which has led to the understanding of the colonial mode of production, was developed through scientific, revolutionary scientific investigation and conducted by the leader of the African nation and worldwide African revolution, who refused to concede the future of Africa to the colonizer, who, refused to, let the Black Revolution, just die with the counterinsurgency defeat, led by the U.S., a colonial power, and of course joined by the colonial powers of the world. So, who rescued the Black Revolution and has brought it, to where we are today, with just the advancement through the African People's Socialist Party and the African Socialist International. So I have the honor of introducing Chairman Omali Yeshitela, responsible for the understanding provided in this discussion today. So I want to welcome up now Chairman Omali Yeshitela to today's Omali Taught Me Sunday study. Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru. Thank you very much, Comrade Kile, for the introduction. And I want to really express my appreciation to Secretary General Comrade Luwezi Kinshasa for that overview. It is extremely important. And I want to, per usual, send out a special shout to our brothers and sisters at home on the continent of Africa itself. We haven't forgotten you, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that we are not forgotten by those of you who are at home. Especially, it's important to talk about what Comrade Luwezi just mentioned, and we're talking about the Sahel, and we're talking about, generally speaking, what's happening in Africa. Comrade Luwezi gave some really important, specific kinds of details about relationships and how these are articulating themselves throughout Africa and to some extent the rest of the world. And that's what we want to talk about. And it's important for me to remind everyone here, especially you brothers and sisters from throughout the world, that this is not just some kind of a talk fest, that we are a revolutionary party. And our objective is to overturn the oppression of African people, the exploitation of African people globally. And the fact is that what we've come to understand through our investigations, through the struggles that we've been involved in, is that the future of the entire world depends on the outcome of the struggle of African people. That this, again, is a part of a movement to overturn this particular relationship and to place what is happening in Africa in an historical context. And when we do that, what we come to understand is that the struggles that we're seeing, the vicious role of governments, of assassins and murderers that we see exemplified by what is happening in occupied Palestine, by the white people there who have taken the land, renamed the land, call themselves Israeli, Israelis call Palestine Israel, etc. That this is something that has its origin in something that happened a long time ago, and it's happened in Africa. I want to remind everybody that what happened to me, to the Uhuru movement, to the Uhuru 3, that on July 29th of 2022 has its origin on this attack on Africa itself. It didn't just start. That African people are not on this land where I am located now, of the indigenous people who have been almost disappeared as a consequence of the attack here. We didn't just pop up here, but this was a part of an assault on Africa. And I think it's extremely important for us to understand that and place it in the context. When you see what is characterized as poverty, oppression, exploitation on the continent of Africa, you're seeing a part of the consequence of the attack that brought me here to the Americas, to what is called America and the Americas as well. And so it's important for us to say this, that our objective, we are not just some kind of protest organization or protest movement. We've seen situations, and we live within a world where the movement is everything and the revolution is nothing. So everybody's quite busy. They have the best protests. They get more likes and things like that on social media, et cetera, but it doesn't contribute at all to undermining a colonial mode of production. That's what the objective is. That's what we are doing. That's why the US government, the colonial power, the hegemon at the moment, even if it's a shaky, on a shaky foundation, that's why they attacked the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement on July of last year. So I think it's really important to say that. So what I want to do is, first of all, say that this discussion that we're having, the discussion that we have around Palestine, the discussion around the Sahel and Africa is part and parcel of the understanding and development political program, the tactics and strategies that are connected to that of our party for the liberation of African people. I want to share briefly the fact, again, that we're a political party and that I'm looking at a political report that I made to our plenary, the second plenary in 2021 of the African People's Socialist Party, within which I quote also from a 2017 document, a plenary to our Congress. And so it's important because we've been fighting since for 600 years. And our struggle has gone through various stages and setbacks and advances, et cetera. And one of the most outstanding things that have occurred in this whole struggle was the Garvey movement, the movement led by Marcus Garvey, that had 11 million members and participants throughout the African world. And Garvey, of course, was framed up by the United States government because he led such a magnificent struggle that challenged the entire colonial mode of production, that had begun the process of negating colonialism throughout the world. Shipping lines, factories, and things like that have been created so Africans can be independent and not reliant upon this hostile parasitic relationship that had been imposed on us. So we say, I say in this document, this is from 2021 report to the second plenary of the African People's Socialist Party, quote, "We are the whirlwind that Garvey predicted would represent his ideological, political, and organizational presence following his US imprisonment and 1927 banishment by deportation to Jamaica, the island of his birth. We are 21st century Garveyites who have the benefit of the lessons provided by his work and experience. My political report adopted at the party's 2017 plenary helps inform our understanding of the significance of the African Socialist International as a concrete expression of African internationalism. The African Socialist International, this is the African People's Socialist Party writ large throughout the world. And it is a concrete expression of African internationalism. So the African internationalism that we're talking about, the theory that we're talking about, and we say that any revolutionary movement has to be guided by revolutionary theory. And the fact is that we are not just talking about theory as some kind of abstract expression of some kind of abstract reality, but it is a concrete expression of this African internationalism, that is to say, the African Socialist International. It is critical that we review this extensive excerpt, keeping in mind that African internationalism is a theory of practice, a theory with a plan. Quote, "The demand by African people for national liberation is a demand that recognizes the fact that we are colonized, that the African nation as a whole lives under foreign domination. We have been waging this concerted struggle for 600 years, since the Portuguese invasion that initiated the capture and enslavement of African people in 1415. Because the African nation has been forcibly dispersed throughout the world, the struggle for African liberation has naturally traveled with us as part of the process that gave rise to the capitalist system as a worldwide system. The concentrated, self-conscious struggle for African national liberation reached its apex under the leadership of Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League in the first quarter of the 20th century, informed by the slogan, "Africa for Africans at home and abroad." Some people get that mixed up because they're in the United States when they say at home. Some people think that he's talking about in America and abroad. No, when he said at home, he's talking about in Africa and all the other places abroad from Africa. And so since that time, after many setbacks, serious class-based battles within the African community, and the establishment of neocolonialism as a generalized condition for African people, we are forced to look beyond national liberation to the question of the kind of society we are fighting for and to identify the social forces necessary to achieve it. Africans, a once free people existing within our own independent economies in Africa, have been transformed into commodities, first capital, and producers of capital, first workers, within a social system defined by the relationship between capitalist production and producers, resting on a foundation of slavery and colonial domination of peoples and territories. National liberation serves the purpose of freeing Africans from direct foreign domination. However, direct foreign domination is not necessary for vicious, life-draining economic exploitation, either by foreign or domestic capital. National liberation under the leadership of the African petty bourgeoisie leaves in place a system of exploitation. African toilers, producers, continue to be exploited under the aegis of a domestic flag, which may even be, as in the current situation in Libya, a red, black, and green flag. To be victorious, our revolution must take place under the leadership of the African working class. This is the role of the African People's Socialist Party, the advanced detachment, general staff of the African working class. Only the African working class, aligned with other toilers, especially the poor peasants, has a stake in destroying the entire system of exploitation and all of its attendant structures, including the artificial borders that exploit Africa but function as incubators for the reproduction of the neo-colonial petty bourgeois class as a social force. Only the African working class is compelled to fight for the destruction of class society and the exploitation that produced it. Under the independent revolutionary leadership of the African working class, organized under African internationalist principles, victory will mean the defeat of foreign imperialists and their domestic minions. It will mean that the toilers, the workers, and poor peasants in particular, will become the new temporary ruling class, the custodians of the means of production now owned and controlled by capitalists, mostly foreign. Liberation under the leadership of the African internationalists informed workers organized in the African People's Socialist Party will mean the end of economic exploitation. And once the imperialists and African petty bourgeois neocolonialists have been crushed, the end of all exploitation. This means that African women who will play a fundamental role in the liberation of our Africa will rise to full stature with all the rights and authority this infers. This means a major assault will be made against all restrictions on the rights of women that hide under the flimsy and, in most cases, false mask of tradition. Nor will African liberation under the leadership of the African working class tolerate social, economic, and political oppression of sectors of the African nation and working class because of spurious bourgeois morality. And I should say mostly imported to Africa by the colonizers. We condemn the morality and relations that permit Europeans, white people, imperialist corporations, countries, and neo-colonial thugs to exploit our people's lives and resources in Africa and to flaunt laws protecting sovereignty, the environment, and customs with impunity while attacking African people and the working class based on sexual orientation or relations between same-gender loving individuals. The liberated African worker state will only oppress the imperialists and the neo-colonialists who have surrendered Africa's future to them. We will call on the entire African working class and all African patriots to rise up against all who would divide the nation. And the working class, based on the false contradictions of sexual identity, ethnic identity, and regional and religious differences. The African revolution that liberates and unites Africa and African people under African internationalism. The organized, conscious, and victorious leadership of the African working class will be the death knell of imperialist white power and capitalism as a world economy. It will finally allow for the African workers to take social possession of the means of production. We're not just talking about what exists now. We're talking about the struggle to overturn it and build a new future. And we're talking about how that future can look, must look, will look under the leadership of the African working class, organized independently in its own revolutionary organization. The African revolution that liberates and unites Africa and African people under African internationalism, organized, conscious, and victorious leadership of the African working class will be the death knell of imperialist white power and capitalism as a world economy. It will finally allow for the African workers to take social possession of the means of production. Our victory will mean the entire process of production. Mining, building, manufacturing, shipping, distribution, etc., will occur through workers' councils throughout the production process. This will guarantee safety and creativity throughout. Workers will not approve going into mines that are unsafe, and improvement in the productive process will not be motivated by profits and has no regard for safety and proficiency otherwise, but by the needs and aspirations of workers as producers and consumers. Additionally, because the state of the African economy is smothered by the whims and requirements of imperialist white power, has minimal industrial development, much of the lackluster economic life is centered on the countryside. The African internationalist revolution will be the first major step in the world to resolving the contradiction between the city and countryside. The full rapid development of Africa will require it. We will have to reorganize the African economy, destroying all borders into a full-fledged anti-colonial economy. Today's economic activity in Africa is tied to the interests of foreign imperialist exploiters. Every bit of food grown or not grown, every factory, every decision to develop a diamond, gold, iron, or bauxite mine instead of production that satisfies our needs is imperialist-driven. It has been the imperialist-driven economy that has forced so many African men, women, and children from the artificially created cruel conditions of the countryside into unsanitary and overcrowded cultural crushing cities. The African working class, as a transitory ruling class, will organize production based on the real needs of the people, rather than the contrived, profit-driven and profit-motivated needs of the capitalists. Collective housing, neighborhood councils with the power to solve domestic problems, efficient public transportation, African education system, illiteracy eradication campaigns, centers for music, culture development, and socializing, birthing programs and socialist care for our elderly, time and centers for reflection, revolutionary rehabilitation programs, barefoot doctors deployed into the community as in China, Cuba, and in Cuba, places where lovers can go for privacy, will become ordinary features of life, overturning the horrible day-to-day grind that characterizes our reality today. Even the form of the family will be reorganized under the dictatorship of the African worker state. It will allow adults to enter into agreements of relationships that are free from economic compulsion. Women will be assured economic independence, so financial duress will not be a factor that determines their commitment to a relationship, nor enslaves their emotions. The immediate role of the African worker state will be to function as a protector of society against incestuous, exploitative, and oppressive relationships and their consequences. African men and women can determine whatever arrangements they contract among themselves, with the state functioning as arbiter only until the time when the rule of habit and tradition overturns the rule of the state that becomes necessary in human affairs. Our party also has a deep commitment to the well-being of our African children, recognizing that under systems of parasitic capitalism, our children live with daily trauma. They are demeaned, locked up, and gunned down by the colonial police and tormented in the white school system. The African People's Socialist Party follows in the footsteps of the African Revolution in Haiti, whose victory in 1804 produced a progressive constitution that, for the first time in history, abolished all notions of an illegitimate child and pledged a commitment to the nurturing and protection of every child. The African adage declaring the role of the village in raising a child will be given new life. Women will be freed from the burden as isolated individual primary child caregivers. The family now becomes a society in a relationship that has the force of law and collective resources for the people that have been liberated from their role as surplus under private ownership within the capitalist system. This means the institution of state-funded and administered nurseries and childcare collectives that benefit parents and children in a manner that could never happen under colonial capitalist society, developed through the commodification of African parents and children. Parents and the community at large will be able to engage in a stress-free, non-competitive relationship with our children. The African internationalist liberation and unification of Africa and Africans worldwide will be the major blow to destroy the entire capitalist system that was an outgrowth of colonialism. It will be the fundamental instrument in the emergence of world socialism, providing the defining direction of the world economy. So I wanted to, let me just say a couple more things related to that. The point that I really want to make is that we are African internationalists. We are a revolutionary party. Our objective is not just to protest. Ours is not a situation where the movement is everything and the revolution is nothing. So we got people who are experts at being in the movement. Some people have careers in being in the movement, but they are not doing a damn thing to negate colonialism. That is the revolutionary task. That is the reason for this assault that's happening right now in occupied Palestine. That is the reason for the July 29th attack on the African People's Socialist Party. Not because we have good demonstrations, a big demonstration, not because we are opposed to what the United States is doing through Ukraine and Russia, maiming and killing so many people there, et cetera. It is because we are engaged in an actual practical program to undermine, to negate colonialism itself. And we are making an assault on the colonial mode of production, not just in St. Louis, Missouri, North Side, but also in South Africa and West Africa and Northern Africa, throughout Southwest Africa. That's who we are. And throughout the Caribbean and in Europe, places we've given life to the revolutionary project of African people in Europe as well. We are part of a same revolutionary trajectory that makes an assault on colonialism as a mode of production. And we are fighting against the examples of colonialism as they make themselves manifest in the European world as capitalism, et cetera. We are the ones leading that struggle. African people are, indigenous people are, the Mexican, Palestinian people. That's the thing that makes us such a threat, because we represent the foundation of the whole social system itself. That's what's happening. When we look at what's happening in places like the Sahel, et cetera, it is because we are, again, the foundation of the entire social system. So, Comrade, so we're facing various iterations of colonial oppression, exploitation, and tactical and strategical moves. For example, Comrade Secretary General Luwezi mentioned the fact that there was this whole movement. I forgot the time frame this happened. Perhaps it was the 80s, where the Europeans were demanding that Africa engage in multi-partyism, as opposed to like the one-party states they had there. And the reason this was happening because of the way neocolonialism was articulating itself in the continent of Africa, where ethnic groups, or leaders of ethnic groups, and we have Africa locked into this pattern of ethnic development, ethnic politic, in part because the colonizers created this situation where there was no African-wide economic development. So the majority of the economic development, or participation, I should say, wasn't development, occurred within these ethnic groupings. And so one leader representing a particular ethnic group who becomes a pawn of the colonialists themselves comes to power, and he creates their own party. And this party is an ethnic-based party. And we know this is the case. We saw what happened with Lumumba. The thing that made Lumumba significant was that he organized across ethnic lines. And he blew their minds because they had decided what ethnic group was going to be in power. The same thing with Nkrumah. Nkrumah organized across ethnic lines. So he did not fall into that trap of this ethnic group versus that ethnic group. And so that gave power and influence to all Africa, as opposed to locking into this situation. But now what the imperialists have been demanding was this multi-party elections and activity that they demanded that they happen within a certain time frame in the continent of Africa. Why? Because once they had just these particular ethnics dominating the political situation, then it meant that there was no room for other sectors of the petty bourgeoisie from other ethnic groups to ascend to power. Now, the only thing they could do was to fight to overturn militarily the ethnic group that was in power. And that created incredible instability throughout Africa, and then an attack on the profits of the colonizers themselves, the stability and control of the colonizers themselves. So what they did was demand that there be these multi-party. They want all the different ethnic groups to be able to participate in these elections, similar to what happens within the United States and other capitalist societies, that gives the impression of a certain kind of democracy because everybody can, quote unquote, participate. But they participate facilitating a same social system, and it takes pressure off of the system because everybody can participate. You don't have different ethnic groups at war with other ethnic groups, destabilizing the whole situation for the colonizers. So I just want to say that I think it's important to have made this point, and I want to make a couple of other statements quickly, because what's really important is to understand that this ain't nothing new that we are dealing with. What is new is America, as is characterized. What is new is Europe, as is characterized. All of this, Europe and America, came into existence as a part of a process of enslaving and colonizing the rest of the world. Was no Europe, was no Palestine, was no Europe, was no America before the assault on Africa 600 years ago. This is the historical trajectory that gave birth to the system, and this is the thing that will stop it once we mobilize and organize the people who became victimized as a part of the process of creating the social system itself. And I'm not just waxing nostalgic and trying to go back to some a long time ago. What I am saying is that we have to identify the contradictions that are knotted, that are contained in this process of oppression and exploitation, so that we can make an assault on them, so that we can develop tactics and strategies that overturn this, so that we can have a new world. But as it is now, we look at living in a world where all the laws that determine the reality of everybody on earth these are laws that are created by the colonizers. Even most of what is characterized as international law. This was law that was made while most of the colonized people were living under colonial domination and had nothing to say about what the laws would look like. And what kind of laws would the colonizers make? Except laws that would protect colonialism, laws that would punish those who were going against the colonial order. So you have a whole mode of production that has come into existence, and I want to try and quickly say some things about that. I wanted to quote from a really important document. There are several things that I wanted to talk about. And, you know, like when I look at an uneasy equilibrium, which is the political report to the Sixth Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. We say that capitalism entered the historical scene as a world system stemming from slavery and colonialism, and its power to define reality was nearly absolute. What is known as racism is a consequence of the power of capital built on the backs of Africans and indigenous peoples. In fact, racism, as we discussed earlier in this chapter, is the ideological foundation of the global capitalist social system. Racism is a component, we might say, of the as an expression of the superstructure spawned by the process of capitalism conception. Therefore, it is nearly impossible to exaggerate the extent of its intellectual influence in the US, Europe, and the world. What is called racism is a biological analysis. It is reinforced by the creation of such things as the discipline of anthropology, used for the express purpose of proving the superiority of whites or Europeans over Africans and others and all others. I should say created for that purpose. This analysis had an understandable influence over how Africans would begin to explain white people as oppressors in the struggle to recapture our humanity, resources, and freedom. Victimized by this pseudo-scientific approach, Africans adopted a competing biological analysis to explain the evil nature of the white man. And so this is an example of how the means by which a society, in this instance, we're talking about a global society, explain the world, the ideas that stem from a particular way that the society achieve what it needs to exist. This is called the superstructure. And so I'm looking at, and I invite people to take a look at this book, A History of Africa by Jose Jaffe, which is an interesting book. And one of the things that I wanted to show here is how he has a chapter here called Colonialism as the Genesis of Europe. Colonialism as the Genesis of Europe. And he goes on to say that the 15th century then, that is 1400s, etc., saw the multiplication of primary accumulation of European capitalism, which is what Marx called primitive accumulation. And Africa played the most important part in the process as the principal arena of European colonialism, the very genesis and foundation of the capitalist system. From the turn of the 16th century, the Americas and Asia were added to this foundation, and out of this totality arose capitalism in modern Europe.
Before capitalist colonialism, there was no Europe. Only a collection of feudal, mercantile, and tribal towns, farms, villages, discrete states and kingdoms vying and warring with each other, just as in Africa, but on a different property basis, that of private property of the land. Europe then was neither a concept nor a reality, at most a vague idea that Arabs, but not Europeans, had long ago of some place northwest of Greece. As long as Europe remained isolated from the world, there was no Europe. When it became connected with and dependent on first Africa, then the Americas, and finally Asia, it began to become a reality and an idea. Only when Portuguese, Spanish, French, Italian, Dutch, English, Germans, Danish, and Swedish confronted and clashed with Africa, America, talking about the indigenous people here, and Asia, did the need arise for them to consider themselves as a set, a whole, different from, hostile to, and eventually superior to Africans, Americans, and Asians, Americans being colonized people here. Colonialism gave them a common interest. This common interest, slaving, plantations, the world market, looting, precious metals, spices and territory, markets and sources of wealth, was also the source of their conflicts among themselves. From 1500 on, they had already started to quarrel and fight over the colonial booty. In these intra-European conflicts, Portugal and Spain had in time to give way to Holland and France, and these in the 18th century to Britain, while German hidden colonialism, Calvinist, Catholic, and Jews alike, steadily garnered what they could of the booty without shedding their blood or losing their own property in the process. The scramble for Africa that led to 1884-85 Berlin Conference had its roots in 4 centuries of struggle between the European powers for the division of Africa. Colonialism, the basis of European unity, was the basis also of its disunity. Europe was born out of colonialism as the exploiting, oppressing, negating pole that tried always to destroy and assimilate its opposite pole, the rest of the world. Europe was the emergence of novelty out of the conflict of opposites, capitalism and pre-capitalist systems, or et cetera, et cetera. So it's say with capitalism arose Europe, and with Europe, the myth of European civilization, a civilization based on African slavery, American plantations, Asian spices, precious metals from all 3 non-European continents, based too on Indian numerals, Arab algebra, astronomy and navigation, and Chinese gunpowder, paper, and compasses. This non-European European civilization was a Narcissus-like admiration of its own conquests. The sword, gunfire, murder, rape, robbery, and slavery formed the real material basis for the idea of European superiority. It was out of this process that the very idea of European man arose, an idea that did not exist even in etymology before the 17th century. Before the slave trade in Africa, there was neither a Europe nor a European. Finally, with the European arose the myth of European superiority and separate existence as a special species or race. There arose indeed the myth of race in general, unknown to mankind before. Even the word did not exist before the lingua franca of the Crusades. The particular myth that there was a creature called a European, which implied from the beginning a white man. Colonialism, especially in Africa, created the concept and ideology of race. Before capitalist colonialism, there were no races, but now suddenly and increasingly, there were races. So I just wanted to share this with you because when we talk about the Sahel and what's happening in Africa, when we talk about what's happening in Palestine, when we talk about the struggles happening in most parts of the world, they have their origin in the attack on Africa. And the thing is, there's an ongoing assault on an understanding by Africans and the world of the significant role that we have played in history. Because once we come to understand that, then it becomes more difficult for them to control African people and the colonizer of the world. Because it is the colonizer who has controlled the educational process, almost absolutely. Even now, when we're having this discussion, what will be heard and seen will be determined in part by Zuckerberg, the colonizers, who will say how much of this will be able to go beyond a limited number of people. They contain and control the discussion and the education mass of the people. That's one of the reasons they attacked us. Not because they thought we were connected with Russians or anything like that, but because we were connected to you, because we were talking to the people. And because there's an ongoing process by the colonizers who must necessarily distort and falsify history, because once understood, the truth understood then becomes a power that makes it difficult for them to control the rest of us. So I wanted to share that with us. And I want to thank again Comrade Luwezi Kinshasa for going through some of the specifics of how this colonialism articulates itself and the relationships that exist and the humiliation that comes with colonialism. It comes all the time with colonialism. It's an absolute necessity. It's part of this whole thing that we talked about in terms of how racism functions as a means of ideological foundation for a social system. That's what Zionism does. It's the same thing. It's something that some people find themselves fighting against Zionism as the answer to the question is colonialism. And colonialism takes different faces depending on what the objective of the colonizer happens to be at any given moment. Before there was a Zionism that was having this kind of attack on the people were still being oppressed and exploited. It's just the Zionism then incorporated a whole bunch of people who otherwise would have been fighting in France and fighting in Germany and fighting against the colonizers and oppressors in those different places against the social system, now are not fighting against that system. They've united with the system to fight against the oppressed people of the world. This is what it does. This is what the people say, well, why don't the white workers do what the white workers are supposed to do in terms of uniting with the workers and the colonized peoples of the world? Because the workers of the world are benefiting, first of all, the white workers, the colonizer, get some material benefits from this relationship of colonialism. And secondly, because they are misinformed. They are given this philosophy, this racism as an ideology that's an underpinning of the whole system that recruits them into becoming actual forces that can collaborate with the oppressor and keeping the who should be their allies, should be part of the same process, should be part of the workers of the world into the project to overturn the whole system, but they don't. Because they have been blinded by this philosophy. And that's why we say theory is so critical, important. That's why Marx made the statement that theory, when grasped by the masses of the people, becomes a material force. That Zionism a material force. And this unites all these people and gives all these people who hate Jews, even, who murdered Jews, gives them now a common enemy in Palestinians and Africans and other peoples around the world. It's just an iteration of a colonial philosophy that's at work here. So our objective is to overturn that. And like I said, we are not an organization of protesters. We do protest and have protest and will protest. We built the Black is Black Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparation because we wanted to change this discussion about what peace was, what war is, because the war that's being made every day against the colonizer is not something that was ever recognized by the colonizer left, by the progressive leftists, et cetera, who have at different times united consciously and openly with the concept of colonialism as long as it benefited the future that they saw themselves fighting for. How many colonizers are looking forward to returning this land that I'm in now to the wronged and massacred and oppressed and ghettoized indigenous people living in concentration camps? How many of the colonizers left finding a way to bring the resources stolen from African people right here in this country back to African people so that we can reclaim our lives and our capacity? They aren't there. The colonial question is fundamental and profound, and that's why the African People's Socialist Party has taken on the task that we've taken on to overturn that social system and to attack it from 1,000 different angles and building new relationships that are anti-colonial. And this is why the government attacked us. And this is why right now we look at places in Niger and Mali and other places in the so-called Sahel. This assault is being made on the people. It's bigger than France. And it's bigger than Niger and Mali. It's a whole world economy. It's bigger than what we see happening in Palestine, which is why we say that we refuse to allow the Palestinian revolution to be isolated from the rest of the struggle against colonialism and for a new world of where oppression has been ended. We say death to colonialism and the colonial mode of production. And I want to thank you again, Comrade Akile, Director. I hope I did not go too much over. I know I went a little bit over. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, Uhuru. This is such a profound study. And, I just want to say that it's really important for us to recognize, everything that you're saying, and especially the point that you're making about how for the first time in history, there was a creation of a world economy that we would all be forcibly locked into. And, we talk and we mentioned some, about the pre-existing economies that existed in different places throughout the world. It had been disappeared with the introduction of the colonial mode of production. So when we're saying everything is connected, that these struggles shouldn't be isolated, lest we make the mistake of fighting an expression of the primary contradiction and not the contradiction itself. We have to take that seriously. And all of the borders, the war, the conflicts, the political, the quote unquote political instability, neocolonialism as a tool of imperialism, all of it, the colonizer, as you pointed out, Chairman, constructed an entire world and a world order that gave birth to institutions like, the IMF and World Bank and these international governing bodies that give themselves power, that you can't, as colonized people, we can't make a move or a decision without the permission of colonial powers. How else can this reality be explained outside of a colonial mode of production? It cannot be. There is no explanation more clear, more revealing than, the colonial mode of production. So I just really want to salute you and the struggle for African liberation that has allowed us to reach this conclusion, because as Africans, as the pedestal for which the entire social system rests, it was our responsibility, as you laid out, either we perish or we come to this conclusion, that this system built on our backs and maintained through the exploitation and domination of African and colonized people. This was a conclusion we had to come to, and it's something that we've been able to provide the entire world in terms of a blueprint for the future and what the world can look like and how the world is changing and is reflected in all of the anti-colonial struggle that, we've discussed up to now. So really, again, salute you, African internationalism, and the work of the African People's Socialist Party that's helping masses of people come to these same conclusions. So, comrades, we're going to just take a brief pause here.
Before Comrade Director, I just wanted to just point out again that what we're seeing in Sahel is not new. Murder, what we're seeing in Palestine is not new. It's an historical process that Europeans refuse to recognize. And people can cry crocodile tears of what's happening in Palestine now and what's happening to the three Zionists, three Jews who were just killed by the state of Israel, even as they came out shirtless, waving a white flag, because the objective was to kill everybody. And so they became part of everybody who was being killed. But I want to just say, this is, again, from A History of Africa by Hosea Jaffe. And he talks about, Gorée was one of the castles, if you will, slave-holding places in West Africa. And he talks about, he says, the Gorée curator and Leopold Senghor put the total number murdered by European slavers at 200 million. So how many more would have been killed had they gone meekly to slavery can only be imagined. the death toll was about 1 in every 3 of the 600 million Africans who lived during these centuries of dark Europe in Africa. 1 in every 3. The death toll was created by the mode of the slave traffic, the long journey to the coast, the violent seizure of slaves from tribes and societies by chiefs collaborating with the Europeans, the lack of food, and the long voyage. Resistance saved whole villages, untold millions of lives, engineered many escapes, frightened off many slaving expeditions, thus raising the cost of a slave and of slaving, making it more difficult to finance and execute. So this is just part of what I think is really important to understand. It's not new. And Europe has been living off the blood and gore of the oppressed peoples of the world, and they have succeeded. Europe, the colonizer, has succeeded up to now in capturing what appears to be the majority of the European population into this process of murder and mayhem. And of course, this comes with the assumption that there is no alternative to what it is they have now, so that Europeans are terrified. Why shouldn't they be terrified every time a Palestinian makes a move to come into occupied Palestine? It's their land. We've heard the concept of la reconquista that's spoken of as it relates to the Mexican people. Every time a Mexican crosses that artificial border that has been created subsequent to the theft of half of Mexico, is like reconquering their own land, their own territory. That is a problem. That's why they put children in cages. That's why they have more police organizations at the borders than you can find almost anywhere. That's why they do what they do to African people here in this country, because anything that we do that represent progress for ourselves, for our people, independent of the colonizer, is a threat to the whole colonial system and the way of life. And that's why, and too often, it has the support, the solidarity of the vast majority of the colonial population, the colonizer population, because what they have relies on this relationship. But that's short-sightedness, because the fact is that colonialism is going to die, and the colonizers are going to die, and especially conscious colonizers who attempt to maintain this relationship will die. Because the oppressed peoples of the world, who are the vast majority of the peoples of the world, notwithstanding the ongoing genocide that's being committed against us, which is also one of the reasons of the genocide being committed against us, the peoples of the world are determined to be free, and human progress cannot occur without the freedom of the peoples of the world. So I just wanted to say that, Comrade Uhuru.
Yes, Uhuru, Chairman. I mean, you made the point so many times that the whole, like, human progress was stunted with the imposition of the colonial mode of production. And so there's no way to advance forward, unless the colonial mode of production is destroyed. And like you said, Africans and colonized people are determined will destroy the colonial mode of production. So really want to, again, salute your leadership and this entire study. This is very profound. We have some really important comments and questions coming in, so I want to make sure that we get to those. And before we do get to your Q&A, and if you have a question, comrades tuning in, please make sure to put that into the chat so that we can get it and put it into the queue. But right now, we're going to take a moment to look at some announcements so you can see what's upcoming in the Uhuru movement. And before kicking off the announcements, I want to just really encourage everybody participating in this discussion to donate to paypal.me/Omali Taught Me. And this goes to Uhuru Tours, which allows for Chairman Omali to, travel to win this understanding of the colonial mode of production. And we want to be able to continue bringing the teachings, the dynamic presentations, and the theory of African internationalism to the world. And you can help make that possible by donating today to paypal.me/Omali Taught Me. And, when we look at, throughout throughout the discussion, colonialism is rearing its head more and more. People are talking about colonialism. New York Times published an article last week asking, why is colonialism being discussed? Well, it's because of the power and the struggle that Chairman Omali Yeshitela, has been making for more than 50 years to bring this question to the surface. And, we can continue deepening that, just by allowing the chairman, to extend, again, these presentations throughout the world and, to your campus or organization. And I'll talk a little bit more about how you can bring the chairman, to your campus or organization upcoming. But please make a contribution today to paypal.me/OmaliTaughtMe. So continuing on with our announcements, join the counteroffensives to stop the FBI attacks on the African People's Socialist Party and the African liberation struggle. Drop the charges against the Uhuru 3, sign our petition, the emergency response pledge for immediate updates regarding trial, read the full motion to dismiss, and stay tuned for upcoming events at handsoffuhuru.org. And the campaign, the counteroffensive, is calling on you to bring your skills, your experience, and creativity to this fight back. Go to handsoffuhuru.org/volunteer to see the list of committees and sign up. Build the global anti-colonial free speech movement. And join the Hands Off Uhuru Fight Back Coalition on July 8th. Join the Hands Off Uhuru Fight Back Coalition. On July 8th of this year, individuals and organizations across the political spectrum united in building the anti-colonial free speech movement to say, drop the charges on the Uhuru 3 and defend the right to freedom of speech. The Hands Off Uhuru Fight Back Coalition embraces and fights for the struggles of African, indigenous, and oppressed peoples around the world. Read the statement of unity, our demands, and join today. For more information, go to handsoffuhuru.org/coalition. On Wednesday, December 27th at 6:30 p.m. Central Time, the African People Solidarity Committee presents Jews Against Colonialism, Build Solidarity with African, Palestinian, and Oppressed Peoples. The African People Solidarity Committee is an organization of white people working under the leadership of the African People Socialist Party with the mandate to build the movement for white reparations to African people. This event features Chairman Omali Yeshitela, leader of the African People Socialist Party, who calls on Jews and all white people to stand against the colonial domination of the Palestinian people by the US-backed settler state of Israel. Attend in person at the Uhuru Solidarity Center in St. Louis, Missouri, or online. You can register at tinyurl.com/Jews Against Colonialism. And every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central Africa time, tune in live for the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa region broadcast. The Africa region of the African People's Socialist Party responds to the FBI attacks against our movement with a series of programs under the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign. Join Uhuru movement leaders Tafari Mugeri, Morlai Conte, and Visto Sabisa, who are making the demand for the FBI and U.S. government to back off and allow the African People's Socialist Party to advance the course of African people for self-determination. Watch and follow on Facebook at facebook.com/APSP Africa Region. Also on Thursdays, join the weekly study hosted by the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, Thursdays at 5 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. Register at tinyurl.com/RNDP Studies. Early bird registration is open for the 2024 Uhuru Solidarity Movement National Convention taking place Saturday to Sunday, March 9th and 10th, 2024 in St. Louis, Missouri. As the colonial ruling class escalates their genocidal colonial terror against African, Palestinian, indigenous, and oppressed peoples, an anti-colonial resistance sweeps the world from Gaza to Burkina Faso to North St. Louis. Now is the time for white people to stand in anti-colonial solidarity and demand no more genocide in our name. Go to nomoregenocide.eventbee.com. The African National Women's Organization calls on Black women and our supporters to attend the 2024 Black Women's Convention, an annual gathering of our membership and working class Black women who believe a better world is possible. We organize these conventions because we believe that we must struggle against the devastating impact of colonialism on the lives of African women and around the world. African women from every city, town, province, country, island, and village must attend this convention. Join virtually, online, or in person in St. Louis, Missouri from March 22nd to the 24th, 2024. Early bird registration is open now through December 31st. Go to convention.anwouhuru.org. Give the gift of African internationalism. Gift subscriptions to the Burning Spear newspaper are available at theburningspear.com/subscribe. Choose from print, digital, or a combination of both. You can also sponsor a prisoner subscription. Again, that's theburningspear.com/subscribe. And for your bundle orders to distribute the spear in your community, go to theburningspear.store. And check out books, pamphlets, posters, and more as well, available at theburningspear.store. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study. And Uhuru Tours and Speakers Bureau is an institution of the African People's Socialist Party that coordinates events and tours for Chairman Omali Yeshitela and other party speakers and leaders. Book Chairman Omali and other Uhuru movement speakers for your campus or organization now before the 2024 calendar fills up. You can email info@uhurutours.com or call 727-914-3621. And for more events not mentioned here, please go to theburningspear.com/events to see everything happening in the Uhuru movement. So that concludes our announcements, comrades. Thank you for your patience as we now move into the question and answer portion of our program. And just a reminder to our panelists, Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa and Chairman, that both of you are able to, take or respond to any of the questions that are being posed. And I want to recognize where people are viewing from, and some special viewers. Want to acknowledge comrades out of Havana, Cuba, Comrade Edelso. I want to appreciate you for being on with us today. We have also tuned in Fort Myers, Florida, Battle Creek, Michigan, St. Louis, Missouri, Gainesville, Florida, Occupied Azania or South Africa, Lexington, Kentucky, Silver Spring, Maryland, Oakland, California, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Fresno, California, Largo, Florida, all tuned in with us today. Don't forget to let us know where you're tuning in from by dropping it in the chat section. And also want to acknowledge a donation from Cuba C, New York's and New Jersey coalition made a contribution on today with the comment, "In solidarity with the Uhuru movement, stand with Cuba, and we have to end the imperial wars against all people." Let me see. Oh, and sorry, just to make note that this is a member of the Hands Off Uhuru Fight Back Coalition. So Uhuru comrade, thank you so much for tuning in and for making this contribution to today's study. So we're going to go ahead and take our questions, and we're going to look at a couple of questions that came in from last week, or we'll take at least one from last week and then move on to the ones that came in today. We have this question from Comrade Jainaba, and if either SG Luwezi or Chairman, you're able to speak to this question, if you've seen the developments around this. This was a question asking, can you speak to what is happening between Venezuela and Guyana? And again, this came from last week. So Uhuru, SG Luwezi, and or Chairman, if either of you could speak to that. Let's see.
Yes, well, I didn't hear the question. You froze for like 20, 30 seconds, just when you were about to say what the question was.
Okay, this question came from Comrade Jainaba asking, can you speak to what is happening between Venezuela and Guyana? This came from the study last week, if you've seen developments around that.
Oh, I saw that in the news, but I did not go through that. I just know this question, there is some dispute around the oil, and Venezuela, when I saw the headline, Venezuela claims the right to exploit that oil, and the Guyana seems not to be in agreement with Venezuela. So I didn't really read the details. But the only thing I can say, since both countries, basically Guyana is a colonized country, which include Africans and then Indians from India, and Venezuela being itself under permanent attack from the United States government, what you would like to see is a common front of all colonized nations against the United States government. So any dispute has to be resolved in a way that it facilitates the development of struggle between these two countries, as opposed to going or threatening, to go to any any conflict or armed conflict between the two. So, as I said, I don't really know the specific of it, but I just know, yeah, this is happening. So I can't say much more than that as well.
Uhuru, one of the things I would say is that this is an old struggle, and it's based on borders that were drawn some years ago in terms of the rights to particular territories and regions. This was done by the colonizers, and they had come to some kind of agreement and arrangement based on that. And so ideally, as Comrade Secretary General Luwezi said, that they would come to a united front to deal with colonialism, but that's not the case, because we are also looking at class forces that control the state in both Venezuela and in Guyana. And there's a whole history that's there as well, which is not to say that once you recognize the class forces, it's not, there are contradictions there. So we know that, for example, the current leadership in Guyana came about as a consequence first of a coup that happened many years ago in Guyana that overthrew Chedajega, who was a socialist of sorts of Indian origin. And Guyana is something that has serious division, has for a long time, with the Indian population who were brought into that area for the purpose of acting as buffer, as has happened in many places where the British in particular were colonizers, and Africans were treated like dirt as the enslaved people, and there was never to be any kind of development of an independent African capacity. So the Indians came in as buffers and as kinds of merchants and things like that that maintained the status quo and maintained the relationship to England primarily. As you know, so this coup occurred against Chedajega. I'm probably butchering his name right now. And a person put in place was Forbes Burnham. Forbes Burnham was the guy who was the president, leader of Guyana at the time where Walter Rodney had been organizing in Guyana. He is the person, for the benefit of people who may not remember, who wrote the book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, et cetera, and built a really magnificent kind of coalition party between Indians and Africans there, and represented a real serious threat. Burnham assassinated Rodney. It was a huge blow. I mean, Rodney was a real working class revolutionary intellectual. When I say he was working class intellectual, I'm not understating or underestimating the role, the fact that he did go to some of the, major kinds of educational institutions of the colonizers, but he became an extraordinary intellectual that remained rooted in the working class. And you read Rodney, see anything about him, you know that. In fact, Comrade Omowale Kefing did know Walter Rodney and worked with him briefly in Atlanta, Georgia when he came through there. So Rodney was killed, and Burnham was put in power, was kept in power as a consequence of that. And so what we've seen happening in Guyana is a continuation of a trajectory that has been established by the United States government. So then you have a situation where the same government that overthrew Chedajega has worked to overthrow historically, the revolutionary progressive sector in Venezuela. Hugo Chavez, who at one time had really silenced and this whole contradiction that we are talking about now, Chavez had reached some kind of agreement, and it looked like this struggle had been silenced for a long time. Perhaps it's the oil that has now become a factor, but I do know this, that the United States government sides with Guyana in this thing. And so that informs me a bit about something about what is going on there. The United States is certainly sides with Guyana. Of course, that's working against the Venezuelan government, who they've been trying to overturn now for ages. So that's about all I can say for certain, except the weakness here is that the absence of revolutionary forces that is to say, independent revolutionary forces in Guyana. Guyana, if you remember, that's the place where Jim Jones showed up, where 900, I think it was, Africans in a single day or two were murdered in Guyana. So I just wanted to mention that for whatever help it might provide. There's still deep contradiction that exists within the so-called Guyanese society, that the ones that Rodney was really working to try to deal with and overturn, and was making extraordinary progress. But Rodney wasn't just working there. He was also working, fighting against the Pan-Africanist movement, as it was so characterized and identified. Forrest Burnham was characterized by many of the Black nationalists in the United States as great Pan-Africanists, by the way. Rodney had severe criticism of Pan-Africanism, even though he was characterized and did himself at one time characterize himself as a Pan-Africanist, but he was surely moving toward an African internationalist worldview. Uhuru. Jaina, I hope that was helpful, Jaina. Yeah.
Over here, Chairman Uhuru SG. Thank you so much, and Comrade Jennifer, for the question. And speaking of Pan-Africanism, the criticisms and the different social forces, I want to go into this next question that came in from a comrade username Fudo on YouTube. It says,
Can you say that name again?
Fudo.
Fudo, F-U-D-O?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a comment, but I thought it would be good for us to address. It says, I think the states in West Africa are divided on African self-determination based on the ideas between Marcus Garvey and W.E.B. Du Bois. For instance, ECOWAS wants integration with European markets. So that's the comment, and Chairman and SG Luwezi, don't know if we wanted to.
Let me just say that W.E.B. Du Bois, and the differences between W.E.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey were differences connected to the material interests of the colonizers versus the colonized. And Garvey built a magnificent movement, the objective of which was to overturn the colonial relationship that Africa had with Europe and the United States. Africa for Africans at home and abroad. That was not the position of W.E.B. Du Bois. I want to clarify that. First of all, these are not just ideas that fell out of the sky. These were ideas that had their origin, their basis in the material interests. And in the instance of Du Bois in particular, he worked with the United States government to help get rid of Marcus Garvey, and so did the Communist Party USA and a whole bunch of other forces who saw their interests and stakes being in the existing social order. So yes, there were those who talked about integrating into the social system, and those who were talking about the liberation, total and absolute liberation of African people. But you're talking about interests that were informed, you're talking about stances and positions informed by class interests and relationship with colonialism, with the colonizers, et cetera. So those differences do exist and have existed, and that's part of the task of this study, this discussion, this party. As we said earlier, 21st century Garveyites, that's who we are. And we won't be satisfied with anything less than a total, absolute unification of African people under the leadership of the African working class. And that's not something that we can share with anybody else. So you're talking about integrating into a system that was created by the colonizers. There's no way to get around that objective reality. Uhuru. Someone else, Comrade Fudo. I don't know if Secretary General Luwezi wanted to say anything.
Yeah, just want to say I unite with all the clarification Chairman has brought. These are part of the answering the resolved questions of the 60s, as the Chairman characterized it. ECOWAS, we have to be clear, ECOWAS, anyone who talks about integration, it just means status quo. Integration is just an African people bourgeoisie having secured a share for themselves within the colonial model production. That's what he said. Who's going to be beneficial for anything, or who has benefited of the existence of ECOWAS? It's only the African people bourgeoisie, the president of Ghana, president of this, and the ministers, the generals, people like that. But the African people, no. You go to Ghana, they'll tell you life is harder than it has ever been since the independence. Things are worse. Every single country in Africa, everybody will tell you things are worse than under direct white rule. So ECOWAS, just like the chairman said, AU is an attack on a vision of Kwame Nkrumah. ECOWAS is even a further attack on a. Clearly, they're telling you they're not for African unity. They are for regional unity, which does not make sense. It will make sense if a regional unity is a clear, genuine process for African unity, but it's not. Regional entity like ECOWAS is actually to consolidate the no senseless of AU. That's what it is. And ECOWAS it's not just a failure. It was not great to succeed. It was a great to prevent Africans from going anywhere. So, and this is important because the West Africa, we are involved in this struggle people characterize as a multipolar struggle, things like that. It's a struggle to get rid of ECOWAS. That's what, in the struggle for a different regional integration, which is the integration defined by African internationalism, is integration that basically negates the African people bourgeoisie in power, negate those neo-colonial states, negate all foreign control of Africa, but put in place mechanism, policies for African working class to begin to unify all our production, all our struggle. We define the region as a part of our ongoing project to unite Africa and African nations. So basically, what this program is all about, redefining African struggle, redefining every single process that's taking place around the world with respect that everyone needs to recognize is a part of an attack on Africa, which is starting for everything. So any unity in Africa has to be to deconstruct the whole thing. So put an end on a permanent attack on Africa. So if the person, if you haven't joined here, you have no register. In fact, that's your register for the studies. People who are watching these programs, I'm sure you listen to the announcements Director Kili has made. So I'll stop you.
Yeah, I think it's important to say that when you talk about integration, you're recognizing the viability of what exists. You're not talking about overturning it, you're talking about getting into it. And the fact of the matter is, we said a long time ago, the oppressed do not have the ability to integrate with, only the oppressor has the ability to integrate. So the fact that they will open the door, that's what, they would integrate with Cuba. They want Cuba to integrate, that is to say, to come into what they've already established. Cuba has refused to do that. That's what the problem is with Venezuela. All of the countries and peoples who refuse to go into that's what the contradiction they had with Russia, that they thought once the Soviet Union had collapsed, they would be able to bring Russia and even China into their own orbit. But China and Russia refused to integrate into the system as it exists right now. And that's why they're a problem. And so this question of integration is not just some innocent kind of thing. When you get taught in school, I did that this big contest between Du Bois and what's the other guy's name? Booker T. Washington, and Du Bois was the good guy because he wanted to integrate, and Washington was the bad guy because he said, cast your buckets down wherever you are, et cetera. That's the kind of garbage that we get fed, So the only solution that you can look at in this instance, whether by Du Bois or Booker T. Washington, was a solution that happens within the context of the existing social system.
Uhuru, Chairman, I really appreciate you raising that, especially that last point. And just to say that in any of those discussions, Garvey is never mentioned, so that's always intentional. It's like, here's this other direction, that Africans and colonized people,
What you hear from the enlightened left, Negroes and others, is that Garvey was this real problem because he only wanted to work with people who agreed with him.
Mm-hmm.
So, wow, I mean, that's really extraordinary. I mean, everybody looks for somebody who disagrees with them to build organization, right? So anyway, that's the kind of nonsense you hear. Or they say Garvey had an agreement with the Ku Klux Klan, and he met with the leader of the Ku Klux Klan.
You had these Negroes trying to knock down the doors of the White House to meet with the US president, who was responsible for all the oppression, all the exploitation, and who wouldn't do anything about the Klan killing Black people throughout the South. And Garvey met with the Klan to try to deal with that. He met with, et cetera. So Garvey is the problem, but not the one who tried to get to Woodrow Wilson and meet with him and all those folks. So this is just the perspective of the colonizer versus the perspective of the colonized. This is African internationalism versus the nonsense that we've been pablum fed for generations now.
Yes. Uhuru Chairman, Uhuru Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa.
What can I say quickly? This ECOWAS stuff is well new characterized step by step, which is basically a way to say I disagree with Nkrumah. I don't want African unity. So he said in position to Nkrumah, we prefer integration of Africa step by step, regional integration. This, it's another way it was characterized at the time. Yeah. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yes, well.
Uhuru. And we know the chairman, in your Oxford presentation, you talk about all the efforts made to circumvent Nkrumah's efforts, in uniting Africa. So we are at the end of this study, and I'm like holding my chest because we have all these other questions that have come in, and so many comments and just interaction, engagement with the study. And I really want to just appreciate all of you for your participation, and to let you know that your question is not unseen, that we will take this in our next study, which will be on December 31st, will be the last study of this year, of 2023. It'll be our year in review with Chairman Amalia Shatella, so make sure you join us back on December 31st. And I want to also acknowledge a donation that came in from Unemployed Scholar, username Unemployed Scholar on YouTube. Thank you so much for your contribution to today's study. And we have to move now to the point of wrap up. And I want to, offer our panelists time for closing remarks. We'll begin with Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa and then close out with Chairman Amalia Shatella. So Uhuru, SG.
Yes, well, I just want to thank you first for the privilege to be in this program. And the second thing is we are redefining the world. So which means that every African, wherever you are, any issue you hear about, anything else, come check with, what chairman is saying, what the party say. That's your view, the world view of the future. Every single question, what the parties say, what's African International's point of view? So don't follow anymore anything just, because it's in the news. The reference, primary reference, African International, is making a statement. And this way we contribute in changing the world and bringing more Africans to this process to change the world.
Uhuru, thank you, Comrade Secretary General Luwezi, and you, Director Akili, and all of you who have participated in this discussion from the various locations you in this world. I just want to say again that part of this is a project of building and consolidating our party throughout the world, recognizing that it is our responsibility to change these conditions. We can complain about what other forces are doing in the world and how difficult things are, and whether China is good for Africa or Russia is good for Africa, et cetera. The thing is that Africans are good for Africa, but Africans can only be good for Africans if they are armed, if we are armed with revolutionary theory and revolutionary organization. And that's what the African People's Socialist Party represents. So I wanted to say that, and that this is serious work. And as I mentioned earlier, we're not an organization of protest. We don't do the, we do involve ourselves in protests and have been pretty good at it at different times and different places, but we are not an organization based on protests as such, where the movement is everything and the revolution is nothing. That's not who we are at all. And I think it's really important to say that, because there are people who've been raised up believing somehow that there has to be some kind of automatic transformation, that if you're in an organization for a week or 2 weeks or even a month or 2 years and nothing has happened, and then that must be something wrong, and therefore you have to actually go back to college and get another job, find a way to enter into the social system itself. But revolution is not an event, it's a process. And we have been engaged in this process for some time now. We've developed tactics and strategies. We've been tactics and strategies. We've been
around long enough to gather some kind of experience as revolutionary organization, some kind of political maturity, ideological maturity as a revolutionary organization. And our objective is to get there, and is to make this revolutionary project that results in the liberation of our people. And we believe in all sincerity that the workers of the world will come to power as a consequence of this magnificent African revolution that once harnessed all of our energy, given ideological direction and organizational coherence and cohesion, that this is the future of the world. And we invite everybody to play a role in that. Join the party. Do everything you can to become a part of this process. So I just want to really express appreciation to everybody who's here participating in this study on today, and especially to you, Comrade Director Kile, and you, Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa. Uhuru. Vanguard up.
Relentless.
Relentless.
Uhuru Chairman, again, Uhuru to Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa, thank you so much for joining us today, and to all of you for participating in this study. I also want to acknowledge another donation that came in from Comrade Mensa, who says, I really appreciate the chairman of the Department of Agitprop for the Sunday study. As an African internationalist, I unite with our Uhuru movement, the leadership of the African Socialist International and the APSP. Fists up, fight back. Thank you so much, Comrade Mensa, for this statement and for your contribution to today's study. And I also want to shout out to the Omali Taught Me Show team for helping with the production, the promotions, curriculum development, AV, and chat moderation. They are the team that pulls this whole process together. And again, thank you all for tuning in today, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, or Twitter. We're glad to have you on with us. And of course, salute the brilliant leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Make sure to follow the chairman on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, and Instagram, and subscribe to the Burning Spur TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study. And join us back for our year in review on December 31st, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Uhuru.
Uhuru.